Hey and welcome, I'm Hammeh. In this video we're taking a look and analysis of Overwatch's latest short, The Last Bastion, in which, after decades of slumber, a Bastion unit we're quite familiar with reawakens and goes on a voyage of self-discovery, in both the good ways and bad ways. In this video I'm going to take a look at any new lore, backstory and interesting facts we've learned from the short. Warning, this contains spoilers, please watch the short if you haven't already, it's absolutely beautiful, so do watch it before watching my analysis. Firstly, I'll round up the story. In a forest near Stuttgart and Eichenwalde in Germany, a local bird is building its nest. In collecting twigs, it inadvertently puts a severely damaged Bastion unit back into action. Following some remnants of orders in its programming, the Bastion unit proceeds towards a waypoint on a map while showing a large curiosity in both the world around it and its new bird companion, who has decided to follow it. While helping the bird to build the nest it's made on Bastion's shoulder, the Omnic hears a woodpecker, whose pecking, which sounds like gunfire, suddenly causes it to switch into combat mode, mowing down trees indiscriminately in the area. Showing what looks like regret or sadness, and perhaps believing it's killed the bird, the Bastion decides to continue on the waypointed path. Coming to a tranquil field, and with Stuttgart in the distance as its intended target, Bastion discovers the remains of many other Bastion units. Using his repair tool to examine the memory of one, Bastion sees a flashback of sorts, of a huge battle outside Stuttgart, and one presumably it fought either as a part of or close to. Whether the sound or the actual memory triggers it, Bastion is set back into red combat mode and starts marching towards Stuttgart. Before it makes much progress, Ganymede, as we know it to be called from outside of this short, returns, bringing the twig that Bastion offered it earlier in the short to build its nest. The memory of the twig seems to somehow snap Bastion out of combat mode, and it's one robot attack on Stuttgart. Placing the twig on its shoulder next to the bird's nest, Bastion decides to turn around and head back into the forest. Here's my thoughts on what we've learned and a few interesting things about this short. Like I said, it's a beautiful short, so I don't want to overanalyze it too far, but there are some nice juicy lore points, Easter eggs and a few bits of context for us story and lore fans. Firstly, it was pretty interesting to dig into Bastion's origin and how he meets Ganymede. We had it confirmed before the short that Bastion was awoken near Overwatch's new map Eichenwalde, and from the short we can see that Stuttgart was also the intended target of the Omnic assault that Balderich, the leader of the Crusaders, Reinhardt, as has been confirmed both in the stream and by Michael Chu on Twitter, and other Crusaders and German military helped stop near Eichenwalde. Eichenwalde Castle is also in the background as Bastion walks towards Stuttgart. That's a nice little reference and Easter egg to the map that we've been told about too. We can actually see Stuttgart out of the window in Eichenwalde on the actual map. You can see it here in some footage I took of the map yesterday at Gamescom. If you haven't seen my videos of the new map, do check those out, links are at the end of the video. Finally, as a nice little touch, in this building in Eichenwalde, you can actually see a poster on the wall that seems to have local bird species. That yellow one in the middle looks slightly familiar to me, don't know about you. The next thing we saw a bit more of an insight into was the nature of Omnic or Bastion combat programming, and perhaps some hints as to how AI works. Bastion has some of his HUD symbols that we see in-game on his actual vision in the short, which I thought was a particularly nice touch. It was also interesting that sound triggered this response protocol. When the woodpecker sounded like gunfire, Bastion actually fired at random. It wasn't really aiming at anything, it was almost a reflex response, or PTSD as some people have kind of compared it to. We see two different modes or colours of Bastion in action, the red being a combat or danger mode following programming, and a blue in which he seems to be able to make more investigations, or perhaps follow his own trains of logic or investigation. When we see the waypoints pop up at the beginning, we can also see that orders are still present in this individual Bastion unit's programming, but for some reason it seems to have the ability of some free choice as to whether to follow them or not. Finally, it was interesting to see that Bastion can actually read the memory of other units with his repair tool or prosthesis, as we saw when he found the other Bastion units in the field. The next thing I found pretty interesting was the very graphic depiction of a battlefield in the Omnic Crisis. It really looked like hell on earth. We've seen airstrikes that we've seen in the original trailer in a few other places, and we saw an array of what it might have been like to fight against an oncoming Omnic army. We see row upon row of Bastion units relentlessly marching towards the enemy. The interesting thing of these medium walking Omnics, we actually see these in Eichenwalde broken down. We've already seen them in Anna Amari in original Strike Team images. Genji might be sitting on top of one in this trailer. Finally, we see giant walking Omnics in the background. These might be Titans, as shown in Torbjorn's comic Destroyer. We know that the Omnians did readapt these skyscraper creating robots into huge walking weapons. Also something a bit new. Behind the oncoming Bastions, we seem to see flying units as well. Although we've seen flying airships in other contexts, it's interesting to see here that maybe the Omnic army is actually using them either as bombers or perhaps as dropships, dropping Bastions into battle. Interestingly, we also see the role that Crusaders, an elite German fighting unit that Reinhardt was a part of, actually played in battle. Here we can see a Crusader using a shield to help infantry retreat, and we can also see a fire strike ripping through rows of Bastion units. In a cool piece of lore from the Eichenwald math lore, we actually know that the leader of the Crusaders was a man named Balderic von Adler, and a handful of his best soldiers made a last stand against an advancing automaton army at Eichenwald. Outnumbered and outgunned, they were ultimately slain during the resulting combat. However, thanks to their efforts, the German military were able to push back the Omnic offensive and win the fight. And maybe that's the battle in which we're seeing here. Finally, it was interesting to have a look at the nature of Omnic awakening, or this kind of artificial intelligence that they have. We almost see Bastion have, for want of a better word, feelings. He shows some kind of shock or surprise when Ganymede actually eats a worm that he's been studying. We also see him make some sad kind of noises, or appear sad in a way when he thinks that he may have killed Ganymede. Interestingly, when Bastion hears the woodpecker pecking, I really like the touch that the world suddenly goes dark when he hears the woodpecker. It really sort of almost gives kind of a PTSD or a flashback or a recall kind of effect to things. You can almost see his programming changing as he goes from his sort of blue mode to red mode. On that note, it's interesting to think about what might cause Bastion to actually be able to choose to or disobey the programming or orders that he has. Now, according to its bio on the website, anything that Bastion perceives as a threat can cause it to go into combat mode. But my question is, what is now determining what's a threat or not, if its core combat programming is all but lost? When Bastion sees the twig that it was about to give to Ganymede and help build a nest, that actually triggers it out of the combat mode somehow. We know that Bastion was severely damaged and rusted, and its combat programming was all but lost. So perhaps the damage has caused this ability for it to kind of make a choice? Looking at other areas in the Overwatch universe, we also know that Zenyatta and other Omnics, according to Zenyatta's biography, had this, what they described as a spiritual awakening. The group of outcast Omnic robots abandoned their pre-programmed lives. Were these also damaged, or is there something somehow in the programming or AI of these Omnics during the Omnic Crisis that enables them to do this? It'll be interesting to find out. Thanks very much for tuning in to my quick reaction, lore analysis, and look over of The Last Bastion. If you'd like to check out my Eichenwald gameplay that I got live from Gamescom 2016, go and have a look, playlists below. Do check out my hero lore voice line and interaction videos, Lore Bites, where I try to summarise Overwatch lore topics in a nice, quick and simple way, and analysis of comics, animated shorts, and much more too. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time, I've been Hammeh. Take it easy.